Story number 1. White Hell, the blizzard of 1954. Winter in Canada was always a formidable adversary, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that descended upon our small village in 1954. My name is Michael Thompson, and what unfolded that December night still haunts me to this day. A tale of survival, mystery, and the eerie silence that followed the White Hell blizzard. Our village, nestled near the Canadian border, was a tight-knit community of hard-working farmers and craftsmen. Life here was simple, governed by the rhythms of the seasons and the steadfast resilience of its people. But winter was particularly harsh, with snowstorms that could isolate us for days, even weeks. We were accustomed to the cold, to the biting winds that howled through the barren landscape. But the storm of 1954 was unlike anything we had ever experienced. It began in late November. The weather forecast had predicted a severe blizzard, but we didn't take it seriously. After all, our forefathers had weathered worse, and we were confident in our ability to endure whatever nature threw our way. As the first flakes of snow began to fall, we went about our daily routines, stocking up on supplies and ensuring our homes were well insulated against the impending cold. By mid-December, the storm had escalated beyond our expectations. Snow fell in relentless sheets, and the wind roared with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of our homes. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the roads became treacherous, swallowed by the thickening snow. We hunkered down, candles flickering in the darkness, hoping the storm would pass quickly. But it didn't. The blizzard intensified, transforming the serene landscape into a frozen nightmare. Days turned into nights without end, the storm showing no signs of relenting. We were cut off from the outside world, our communications severed by the relentless winds and snowdrifts. Panic began to set in as we realized the gravity of our situation. Supplies dwindled, and the warmth of our homes provided little comfort against the oppressive cold. It was on December 20th, just days before Christmas, that the unimaginable happened. A rescue team was dispatched to our village after several of our neighbors failed to report in. Their journey was fraught with peril, battling the same White Hell blizzard that had imprisoned us. When they finally arrived, the scene that greeted them was nothing short of horrifying. Every single villager had perished, their bodies found scattered across the snow-covered streets and homes. There were no signs of struggle, no injuries, just a silent, eerie stillness that spoke of a sudden and inexplicable demise. The rescue team was baffled, unable to comprehend how an entire community could be wiped out so swiftly and without a trace. Whispers of the supernatural began to circulate. Some believed that the storm was cursed, a malevolent force that claimed lives without mercy. Others spoke of restless spirits, lost souls unable to find peace amidst the fury of the blizzard. The local authorities dismissed these theories, attributing the tragedy to the extreme weather conditions. But those of us who survived knew there was something more sinister at play. I was one of the few who managed to escape the storm, finding refuge in a neighboring town just hours before the blizzard reached its peak. The memories of that night are etched into my mind. The howling winds, the relentless snow, and the haunting silence that followed the storm's passage. But it wasn't just the physical devastation that left me scarred. It was the eerie sense of loss and the unanswered questions that plagued me. In the years that followed, strange occurrences began to unfold in our now abandoned village. Locals reported seeing shadowy figures wandering the deserted streets, their forms blurred by the ever-present snow. There were tales of disembodied voices singing mournful carols in the dead of night, and the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the empty homes. Some claimed to have seen the ghostly apparitions of the villagers, their eyes hollow and filled with sorrow, forever trapped in the aftermath of the White Hell blizzard. I returned to the village many years later, driven by a need to understand the truth behind the tragedy. The once vibrant community now lay in ruins, buildings decayed and overtaken by nature. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of a swaying roof or the distant howl of a lone wolf. As I walked through the snow-laden streets, memories of that fateful winter flooded back, intertwining with the palpable sense of loss that lingered in the air. In the center of the village stood the old church, its steeple piercing the gray sky like a beacon of hope now long extinguished. Inside, the pews were covered in a thick layer of dust, and the altar was draped in tattered cloth. I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness as I gazed upon the remnants of a community that had been consumed by the storm. It was here that I experienced the first true sign of the supernatural, a soft, ethereal melody that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the church. Following the haunting tune, I ventured deeper into the building, my flashlight casting long shadows that danced across the decaying pews. The music grew louder, more melancholic. As I approached the altar, there, I saw them, ghostly figures of the villagers, their forms shimmering in the dim light. They stood in silent reverence, their eyes meeting mine with a mixture of longing and sorrow. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the haunting melody. One of the apparitions, a woman in a simple dress, stepped forward, her eyes filled with an unspoken plea. "We are lost," she whispered, her voice echoing through the empty church. "Trapped by the storm, unable to find our way home." I felt a chill run down my spine, the realization dawning on me that the spirits of the village were bound to the site of their tragic demise. The white hell blizzard had not only claimed their lives, but had also trapped their souls in an eternal winter of despair. Determined to help them find peace, I delved into the history of the storm, uncovering the accounts of those who had experienced the white hell blizzard firsthand. It became clear that the storm was not just a meteorological event but a manifestation of something far darker, a force that fed on fear and sorrow, trapping the spirits of those it claimed in a perpetual state of torment. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the church, ready to perform a ritual of remembrance and release. Lighting candles and placing flowers on the altar, I began to speak, honoring the memories of the lost villagers and acknowledging the pain that bound them to the land. As I chanted, the temperature in the church began to rise, the oppressive cold lifting as the spirits listened to my words. The apparitions gathered around me, their forms becoming clearer as the ritual progressed. "Remember us," they echoed, their voices blending into a harmonious plea. "Honor our lives, and let us find peace." With a final, heartfelt prayer, I completed the ritual, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over me. The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the light as the last remnants of the storm's fury dissipated. The haunting melodies ceased, replaced by a serene silence that spoke of closure and release. As dawn broke, the village lay tranquil under a blanket of fresh snow. The oppressive presence that had haunted it now lifted. The church stood as a silent testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring need to remember those who had been lost. I left the village with a heavy heart but a sense of fulfillment, knowing that I had played a part in freeing the restless souls from their eternal winter. Years later, the story of the White Hell Blizzard remains a cautionary tale, a reminder of the thin veil that separates life from death and the enduring power of memory and honor. The shadows of that winter night continue to linger in the hearts of those who remember, a haunting melody that echoes through the silent snow-covered plains, forever marking the legacy of a village lost to the unforgiving embrace of the White Hell Blizzard. Story number 2. Shadows on the Frozen Road. Winter in Alaska was always a test of endurance, but the storm that enveloped me that night was unlike anything I had ever faced. My name is Ethan Blake, and I've spent the last decade driving freight trucks across the rugged terrains of Alaska. The isolation, the endless snow, and the biting cold had become second nature to me. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that awaited on that desolate stretch of the Dalton Highway. It was late December 2023 when I accepted a last-minute delivery to a remote mining site near Nome. The weather forecast had warned of an impending blizzard, but the urgency of the shipment left me no choice. I loaded my 18-wheeler with supplies, checked my routes, and set off into the gathering darkness, the road disappearing into the whiteout conditions ahead. The first few hours were manageable. The snow was falling steadily, creating a thick blanket that made visibility a challenge but manageable with my headlights and fog lights working overtime. I listened to the radio for updates, my mind focused on the road and the weight of the cargo I was transporting. My radio crackled intermittently, static-filled updates about the storm's progression, urging caution and advising against unnecessary travel. By midnight, the storm had intensified. The wind howled like a living beast, shaking the cab of my truck and making the windows rattle ominously. Snow whipped against the windshield, reducing visibility to mere feet. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter as the road became barely discernible beneath the relentless snowfall. My breaths were visible in the freezing air as I muttered a silent prayer for safe passage. It was then that I heard it, a faint tapping on the side of my truck. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on my senses, the snow creating unusual sounds as it hit the metal surfaces. But the tapping persisted, growing louder and more deliberate. My heart raced as I glanced over to see the silhouette of a figure standing just beyond the reach of my headlights, shrouded in the swirling snow. Probably another stranded motorist. I muttered to myself, trying to maintain composure. I considered pulling over, but the treacherous conditions made that a risky decision. Reluctantly, I continued driving, hoping the sound would fade into the storm's cacophony. But it didn't. The tapping transformed into rhythmic knocking, echoing around the cabin like a relentless drumbeat. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of unease settling over me. The figure remained stationary, his presence both haunting and inexplicable. My mind raced with questions. Who was out there? Why was someone knocking on my truck in the middle of this blizzard? I tried to focus on the road, my hands steady on the wheel, but the knocking continued, now accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to seep through the walls of the cab. "Help me! Help me!" the voice murmured, barely audible over the storm's roar. My heart pounded as I glanced back, half expecting to see the figure approaching. But there was nothing, only the swirling snow and the oppressive darkness. Panic began to set in. I reached for my phone, intending to call for help, but there was no signal. The isolation of the Dalton Highway was a double-edged sword. While it offered solitude, it also meant that any emergency was met with an unresponsive void. Desperation clawed at me as the knocking grew louder, more insistent, as if the spirit outside was trying to break through, summoning every ounce of courage. I pulled over to the side of the road, the truck's tires sinking slightly into the deepening snow. I turned off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the sounds of the storm and the persistent knocking. Heart pounding, I unbuckled my seatbelt and approached the driver's side door, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the darkness like a desperate plea for answers. The figure stood still, its form becoming clearer as my flashlight penetrated the blizzard. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his face pale and eyes hollow with despair. There were no footprints in the snow around my truck, as if he had appeared out of thin air. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fear and curiosity. He didn't respond, but the atmosphere around him felt charged with a palpable sorrow. His hand reached out towards me, fingers clawing at the air as if trying to grasp something beyond his reach. I took a step back, the cold biting through my gloves, and recoiled in terror. The whispers grew louder, their mournful tones filling the air, as if the very snow carried the echoes of his anguish. I stumbled back into the truck, slamming the door shut and locking it. The knocking ceased instantly, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on me. I leaned against the steering wheel, trying to steady my racing heart, but the sense of dread lingered, refusing to let go. The storm outside raged on, the snow piling higher, burying any hope of immediate rescue. Hours passed in agonizing stillness. The figure had vanished, leaving behind only the lingering whispers and the memory of his sorrowful presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that something unnatural had occurred, that the blizzard was more than just a meteorological event. It was a force that held secrets and spirits bound to the frozen landscape. As dawn broke, the storm began to abate, the howling winds giving way to a tense calm. I restarted the engine, the truck's heater roaring to life, and prepared to continue my journey. But the experience had left an indelible mark on me, a haunting reminder of the night when shadows walked alongside me on the frozen road. A few days later, I received news that chilled me to the bone. The body of a truck driver had been found miles away from the Dalton Highway, his truck abandoned and his remains frozen in a strange pose, eyes wide open in eternal terror. The description matched my encounter, an ethereal figure seen in the midst of the storm, a harbinger of despair for those who dared to traverse the lonely roads of Alaska's wilderness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been visited by the restless spirit of that lost driver, a soul trapped by the storm's unyielding grip, forever searching for peace amidst the endless snow. The whispers I heard were his cries for help, a desperate plea that echoed through the blizzard, reaching out to anyone who would listen. Reflecting on that harrowing experience, I realized that some roads hold memories too dark to forget, their stories etched into the very fabric of the landscape. The Dalton Highway became more than just a route. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring presence of those who had been lost to its unforgiving embrace. To this day, whenever I drive through the snowy expanses of Alaska, I keep an eye out for shadows in the storm and listen for the faint whispers carried on the wind. The memory of that night serves as a reminder that even in the most isolated and treacherous places, the past can reach out to the present, haunting us with the echoes of those who never found their way home. And so, I continue my journeys, ever vigilant, knowing that the spirits of the frozen road are always watching, their silent cries a haunting lullaby that accompanies me through the endless winter nights. Story number 3. The Eternal Blizzard of Great Plains. Winter in the Great Plains was always a formidable foe, but nothing could have prepared me for the blizzard of 1886. I was a young farmer then, barely 22, with dreams as vast as the endless horizon that stretched before me. My name is Samuel Hartman, and this is the story of that fateful winter, a tale of survival, loss, and the haunting melodies that echoed through the storm. It began in late November, when the first snowflakes descended upon our small homestead. The sky was a relentless gray, and the wind carried whispers of an impending tempest. We had heard tales from neighboring farms, stories of storms that lasted for weeks, burying entire communities beneath meters of snow. But we were resilient, hardened by years of battling the elements, and we dismissed the warnings as mere exaggerations. By mid-December, the weather had taken a turn for the worse. Snow fell in relentless sheets, and the wind howled like a banshee, shaking the very foundations of our farmhouse. The livestock began to suffer. Cattle succumbed to the cold, and sheep huddled together for warmth, their bleats barely audible over the storm's fury. We rationed our food supplies, hoping the blizzard would pass quickly, but the snow showed no signs of relenting. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace, listening to the wind's mournful cry, my wife, Clara, approached me with a worried expression. "Samuel, the neighbors are saying the storm isn't letting up. They lost 3 of their cows last night." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. "We'll get through this, Clara. We've faced worse before." But as the days turned into weeks, the blizzard only intensified. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the cold seeped into our bones, making every movement a struggle. The isolation was suffocating. We were cut off from the outside world, with no means of communication or rescue. Desperation began to gnaw at our spirits, and fear took root in our hearts. It was during one particularly harsh night, the storm at its peak, that the strange singing began. It started softly, a distant melody that seemed to float on the howling wind. At first, we thought it was just the wind playing tricks on our ears, But as the night wore on, the singing grew louder, more distinct, like a lullaby carried by the storm. Clara clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Do you hear that, Samuel? It's beautiful, yet so sad." I strained to listen, trying to discern the source of the haunting tune. "It's just the storm, Clara. Don't let it unsettle you." But the singing persisted, weaving through the gusts of wind and the relentless snowfall. It was an ethereal sound, unlike anything we had ever heard before. A voice that seemed to call out from the depths of the blizzard, reaching into our very souls. As the nights continued, the singing became a constant presence, a spectral serenade that followed us wherever we went within the confines of our home. We began to see shadows moving outside the windows, fleeting glimpses of figures standing against the storm, their faces obscured by the swirling snow. No footprints marred the pristine blanket of white. Yet the presence of these apparitions was undeniable. One morning, after weeks of battling the storm, I ventured outside to check on our remaining livestock. The world was a monochrome wasteland, the landscape transformed into a frozen tableau. As I trudged through the knee-deep snow, the singing echoed in my mind, a mournful tune that seemed to guide my steps. Suddenly, a figure appeared before me, a tall man clad in tattered clothing, his eyes vacant and his mouth open in silent anguish. I froze, heart pounding, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. The apparition stared at me for a moment before dissipating into the swirling snow, leaving me trembling in the frigid air. I rushed back to the house, my mind racing with questions and fear. "Clara," I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm. "We need to talk." Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Clara sat huddled by the fireplace, her face pale and drawn. "Samuel, something's wrong. The singing, it feels like it's getting closer." I nodded, understanding the gravity of our situation. "We can't stay here much longer. We need to find a way to survive until the storm passes." Days melded into one another, each day a relentless battle against the cold and the storm's unyielding grip. Our food supplies dwindled, and the loss of livestock weighed heavily on us. The singing continued, a haunting reminder of the spirits that roamed the blizzard's path, searching for something we couldn't quite understand. One night, as the storm raged outside, Clara vanished without a trace. Panic seized me as I searched the house frantically, calling her name into the oppressive silence. There was no sign of her, no footprints in the snow, no evidence of struggle, nothing to indicate where she might have gone. Only the distant echoes of the spectral singing remained, a constant reminder of our mounting despair. Desperate and heartbroken, I took to wandering the snow-covered landscape, hoping to find Clara or any sign of her presence. The singing guided me through the storm, each note a step further into the unknown. Hours turned into days as I battled the elements, my hope fading with each passing moment. Then, one morning, I stumbled upon a horrifying sight, a lifeless body frozen in the snow, sitting upright with eyes wide open, staring blankly at the sky. It was Clara. Her face was contorted in a silent scream, and her body was eerily still, as if she had been frozen in time by the blizzard's wrath. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt beside her, the singing now a cacophony of anguished cries that filled the air. I realized then that the spirits were not just wandering aimlessly but were trapped in a perpetual state of torment, reliving their final moments of desperation and fear. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I delved into the history of the blizzard. I learned that the storm of 1886 was not a natural phenomenon but was rumored to be the result of a failed experiment, an attempt to harness the power of the elements for military purposes. The experiment had gone horribly wrong, unleashing an eternal blizzard that consumed everything in its path, leaving behind a trail of death and despair. The spirits were the remnants of those who had fallen victim to the storm, their souls bound to the blizzard's icy grip, forever searching for a way to break free from their eternal nightmare. The singing was their plea for help, a haunting melody that echoed through the storm, reaching out to those who dared to listen. Determined to honor Clara's memory and free the trapped spirits, I embarked on a mission to end the blizzard's curse. I gathered what little information I could find about the failed experiment, piecing together the rituals and incantations that might appease the restless souls. Night after night, I chanted the ancient words, my voice trembling with fear and hope as the storm raged around me. The final night of the storm was the most intense yet. The wind howled like a banshee, and the snow fell in blinding sheets, making it nearly impossible to see. I stood alone in the heart of the storm, reciting the incantations with unwavering determination. The singing grew louder, more insistent, as if the spirits were battling against the ritual's power. Suddenly, a blinding light enveloped me, and the storm seemed to pause, the silence deafening in its intensity. The spirits appeared before me, their forms shimmering in the light, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, their voices a harmonious blend of sorrow and relief. The storm began to dissipate, the snow melting away as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the once frozen landscape. The singing faded, replaced by a profound sense of peace that settled over the Great Plains. The blizzard had been lifted, the spirits finally free from their eternal torment. I returned home, my heart heavy with loss yet filled with a sense of accomplishment. Clara was gone, but her memory lived on, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring bonds of love. The storm had taken much from us, but it had also taught me the importance of remembrance and the power of hope in the face of unimaginable adversity. To this day, when winter blankets the Great Plains in snow, I remember the blizzard of 1886 and the haunting melodies that once echoed through the storm. The spirits of those lost to the eternal blizzard continue to live on in our memories, their stories a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates life from death, and the enduring quest for peace amidst the storms of life. Story number 4. Shadows at Cabin Hong. Winter in Colorado is unforgiving, especially in the remote stretches where Cabin Hong sits, nestled among towering pines and blanketed by relentless snowfall. It was January 2024 when my friends and I decided to escape the bustle of Denver for a weekend getaway, seeking solace in nature's embrace. Little did we know, the serene beauty of the mountains concealed a darkness that would haunt us forever. Our group consisted of 5: Mark, Jenny, Lisa, Tom, and me. We had been friends since college, bound by shared adventures and an unspoken bond that made us inseparable. The plan was simple: rent Cabin Hong for 3 days, disconnect from the digital world, and reconnect with each other. The cabin was advertised as rustic yet comfortable, perfect for our needs. Enthusiasm bubbled as we loaded our gear into Mark's SUV, the anticipation of the weekend ahead masking any lingering apprehensions. The drive up the winding mountain roads was picturesque, the landscape transforming into a winter wonderland. Snowflakes danced in the air, each one unique, as we chatted and laughed, oblivious to the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. By late afternoon, we arrived at Cabin Hong, its silhouette stark against the fading light. The cabin stood alone, surrounded by dense forest, the only sign of life the occasional rustle of wildlife hidden beneath the snow. Inside, the cabin exuded a cozy charm. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the icy chill outside. Wooden beams supported the ceiling, and the scent of pine and burning wood filled the air. We settled in, unpacking and exploring the space. Lisa found an old board game in the cabinet, and we spent the evening playing, the laughter echoing through the rooms. As night fell, the weather outside took a turn for the worse. The wind howled like a wounded beast, and snow began to fall in heavy, relentless sheets. Mark checked the forecast on his phone, concern etching his features. "Looks like we're in for a rough night," he announced, his voice tinged with worry. We exchanged uneasy glances but decided to stay put, securing the doors and windows against the storm's fury. The first few hours were uneventful. The storm's rage contained within the sturdy walls of the cabin. But as midnight approached, an eerie stillness settled over the house. The howling wind seemed to die down, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against our ears. That's when Jenny noticed something unusual. "Do you guys see that?" she whispered, pointing towards the large window. I followed her gaze and froze. Outside, silhouetted against the swirling snow, stood a figure, a shadowy apparition, tall and indistinct, staring directly at us. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to see more. But the snowstorm obscured any clear view. "It's just the trees," Tom reassured, though his voice wavered. But Jenny shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "No, it's a person. Look, there are footprints." She pointed to the pristine snow surrounding the cabin. No footprints had been there before, yet fresh prints led away from the window, disappearing into the thick forest. Panic began to rise as we grappled with what we were witnessing. Mark grabbed his phone to record the phenomenon, but the device malfunctioned, the screen flickering and then going dark. "Great, just what we need," he muttered, frustration evident in his tone. We huddled together, the realization sinking in that something unnatural was happening. The tension was palpable, the atmosphere thick with fear. Lisa tried to rationalize the events, suggesting it might be a trick of the light or our overactive imaginations. But deep down, we all knew there was something sinister at play. The shadows outside seemed to move with a life of their own, and the feeling of being watched intensified with each passing moment. As the night dragged on, the storm outside showed no signs of abating. The temperature inside the cabin dropped sharply, frost forming on the windows despite the heat from the fireplace. Our breaths became visible, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and something metallic. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the cabin. A window had shattered, snow pouring in and cutting off our only exit. "Stay calm," Mark urged, trying to maintain control. We retreated to the fireplace, barricading the door with furniture to block the relentless wind and snow. The cabin felt like a prison, the walls closing in as the storm raged outside. Every creak and groan of the old structure amplified our anxiety, the fear mounting with each passing hour. In the early hours of the morning, exhaustion overcame us. We took turns trying to sleep, though the tension kept us restless. It was then that the unthinkable happened. Tom vanished without a trace. One moment he was beside us, and the next, he was gone. Panic erupted as we searched the cabin frantically, calling his name into the empty rooms. There was no sign of him, no footprints, no struggle, nothing to indicate where he had gone. Desperate, we decided to venture outside in search of him. Braving the ferocious storm, Mark armed himself with a flashlight, and Jenny grabbed Lisa and me, while I took the voice recorder to document our ordeal. The snow was knee-deep, each step a battle against the howling wind that seemed determined to push us back. As we trudged through the blinding snow, the oppressive silence returned, broken only by our ragged breaths and the distant echoes of unseen horrors. Suddenly, the ground beneath us gave way, and we plunged into darkness, the snowstorm enveloping us like a suffocating blanket. We screamed for help, but our voices were swallowed by the tempest. When I awoke, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene yet eerie stillness. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. We emerged from the wreckage, shaken but alive, the memory of our ordeal etched into our minds. But Tom was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks as we searched tirelessly for any sign of him, but our efforts were in vain. The authorities ruled it a tragic accident. But we knew there was more to the story: the shadowy figure, the unexplained footprints, and the sudden disappearance painted a picture of something beyond our understanding. One evening, months later, I received a call from a local historian who had heard our story. Intrigued, he invited me to visit an old archive, where dusty records and forgotten journals awaited. Among the documents, I found a chilling account of a group of settlers who had perished in a similar blizzard over a century ago. Their desperate struggle for survival had led them to cannibalism, driven to madness by the relentless cold and isolation. As I delved deeper, I discovered references to the ghosts of Donner Pass, spectral figures said to roam the mountains, forever reliving their final moments of horror. The similarity to our experience was uncanny, the lines between past and present blurring into a terrifying reality. The shadows at Cabin Hong were not mere figments of our imagination but the restless spirits of those lost to the mountain's unforgiving embrace. Determined to find closure, I returned to Cabin Hong with the historian, armed with newfound knowledge and a resolve to lay the spirits to rest. We conducted a ritual of remembrance, honoring the lost souls and acknowledging their pain. As we spoke, the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence, the shadows swirling around us in a dance of sorrow and desperation. A figure materialized before us, a man with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. "Help us," he whispered, his voice echoing through the clearing. The historian and I stood in silent reverence, understanding that our actions could finally grant the spirits the peace they so desperately sought. As dawn broke, the oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and acceptance. The shadows receded, and the feeling of being watched dissipated, leaving behind only the serene beauty of the snow-covered mountains. Tom's disappearance remained a mystery, but we found solace in knowing that we had honored the memories of those who had been lost to the mountain's cruel winter. Reflecting on that harrowing experience, I realized that some places hold memories too powerful to fade, their stories etched into the very fabric of the land. Cabin Hong became a symbol of resilience and the enduring need to remember those who have been lost, ensuring that their spirits find the peace they deserve. And as winter returns each year, the snow continues to blanket the mountains, a silent reminder of the night when shadows walked alongside us, forever marking our souls with the echoes of the past. Story number 5. The Wanderer of Mount Washington. Winter in New Hampshire is a formidable force, shaping the landscape into a vast expanse of white silence. Mount Washington, the tallest peak in the Northeast, stands as a sentinel against the relentless cold, its summit perpetually cloaked in snow and swirling winds. As an avid hiker and a seeker of untold stories, I was drawn to the mountain not just for its challenging trails but for the legends that whispered through the pines and echoed across the frozen valleys. Among these tales, one story stood out: a lone hiker lost in a brutal blizzard, his body found in a haunting pose, eyes wide open, forever frozen in time. It was late December 2024 when I decided to embark on an expedition to retrace the steps of that ill-fated hiker. Equipped with my camera, a sturdy tent, and a deep sense of curiosity, I set out to uncover the truth behind the chilling events that had left an indelible mark on Mount Washington's history. The weather forecast predicted a severe snowstorm, but my determination outweighed the fear that gripped my heart. The first few days of my journey were serene, the trails carpeted with untouched snow, and the crisp air invigorating my spirit. I camped near the base of the mountain, the towering peaks looming above like ancient guardians. Each morning, I hiked higher, documenting the pristine beauty and the eerie stillness that enveloped the landscape. The isolation was both calming and unnerving, a reminder of nature's overwhelming power. On the fourth day, as I reached a narrow ridge overlooking a deep crevasse, the weather began to shift. Dark clouds gathered rapidly, and the wind picked up, howling through the rocky outcrops with a ferocity that sent chills down my spine. I knew I had to descend quickly, but the path back was treacherous, hidden beneath layers of snow that obscured the trail. As I hurried down, the temperature plummeted, and visibility became near zero. Snowflakes swirled violently, blinding me and turning the familiar terrain into a disorienting maze. Panic set in as I realized I was caught in the heart of the storm. Far from any sign of civilization, my flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that danced across the blinding white. The wind's roar drowned out all other sounds, making it impossible to hear my own thoughts. I tried to stay calm, remembering the survival skills I had honed over years of hiking. But fear gnawed at my resolve. Hours passed in a blur of white chaos until exhaustion overcame me. I collapsed onto the cold ground, my body shivering uncontrollably, the wind battering me like a relentless foe. Darkness enveloped me, and my mind began to play tricks, conjuring images of lost souls wandering the storm. Just as I was about to succumb to unconsciousness, a faint light pierced through the blinding snow, a beacon of hope amidst the despair. Summoning the last of my strength, I struggled to my feet, the light growing brighter as I moved closer. It was a dimly lit tent, a solitary figure huddled inside, barely visible against the white backdrop. Relief washed over me as I approached, only to freeze in terror at what I saw. The figure was a man, his clothes tattered and soaked, sitting in a grotesque position with his eyes wide open, staring into the void. His presence exuded a sorrowful aura, as if he were a ghost trapped in eternal anguish. "Are you okay?" I managed to whisper, reaching out to help him. He didn't respond. Instead, his eyes met mine, hollow and lifeless, reflecting a pain that seemed to transcend the physical. A cold chill surged through me, and I felt an inexplicable connection to his suffering. I backed away slowly, sensing that something was profoundly wrong. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and the snowstorm intensified, the tent fluttering violently. The man remained motionless, his gaze never wavering from mine. I turned to flee, but the storm had grown even more relentless, the path obscured by a blinding fury of snow and wind. Desperation clawed at me as I stumbled through the whiteout, the image of the man seared into my mind. Days later, after what felt like an eternity lost in the storm, I was found by a rescue team navigating the treacherous conditions. Exhausted and frostbitten, I was airlifted to safety, the memory of that haunting encounter forever etched in my soul. The man was never found, his disappearance remaining a chilling mystery that added to Mount Washington's dark lore. Back in civilization, I delved into the history of the area, uncovering the tragic story of the Donner Party. In 1846, a group of pioneers became stranded on Mount Washington during a brutal blizzard, their journey ending in starvation and cannibalism. Their desperate struggle for survival left deep scars, both physical and spiritual. On the mountain's landscape, it was said that their restless spirits roamed the trails, forever searching for peace amidst the unforgiving winter. My experience seemed to validate these old tales. The sight of the lone hiker, his lifeless eyes staring into nothingness, mirrored the despair of those lost souls. The feeling of connection I had felt was as if their pain had seeped into my very being, binding me to their tragic fate. I realized that Mount Washington was more than just a mountain. It was a living entity, a repository of human suffering and resilience, determined to honor their memories. I began documenting the stories of those who had ventured into the storm and never returned. I interviewed local residents, listened to their accounts of ghostly apparitions and inexplicable phenomena, and pieced together a narrative of survival, loss, and the enduring human spirit. Each story added another layer to the mountain's haunted legacy, a testament to the thin line between life and death, hope and despair. One winter night, compelled by a need for closure, I returned to the very spot where I had encountered the lone figure. Armed with my camera and recorder, I stood on the ridge, the snow swirling around me like a living entity. The wind howled, carrying with it the echoes of past tragedies and the whispers of lost souls. I sat down, opening my notebook, and began to speak, sharing the stories I had uncovered and honoring the memories of those who had perished. As I spoke, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The oppressive cold seemed to lift, replaced by a comforting warmth that enveloped me. The ghostly figure of the man reappeared, his eyes no longer hollow but filled with gratitude and relief. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the recognition and remembrance I had offered. With a final, peaceful glance, he faded into the night, leaving me with a sense of fulfillment and a deep connection to the mountain's enduring spirit. Driving away from Mount Washington, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene and tranquil landscape. The memories of that harrowing night lingered, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of remembrance. The wanderer of Mount Washington was no longer a lost soul, but a symbol of hope and the unbreakable bond between the living and the dead. To this day, whenever winter casts its icy grip over New Hampshire, I feel a lingering connection to the mountain and its restless spirits. The echoes of their suffering and the stories of their survival continue to resonate, reminding us all of the thin veil that separates our world from the realms of the departed. And as the snow falls silently, I am reminded that some places hold memories too powerful to fade, their stories forever etched into the fabric of time. Story number 6. Echoes of Donner Pass. Winter in California's Sierra Nevada is both breathtaking and brutal. The snow-covered peaks glisten under the pale winter sun, hiding secrets that have remained buried for over a century. As someone deeply fascinated by history and the supernatural, I couldn't resist the pull of Donner Pass, the infamous site of one of the most harrowing tales of survival in American history. The story of the Donner Party, trapped by a merciless blizzard in 1846, had always intrigued me. Determined to uncover the truth behind the legends of apparitions and unearthly screams that still haunt the pass, I planned an expedition that would test both my courage and my sanity. It was mid-January when I set out, equipped with camping gear, a sturdy tent, and a notebook to document my findings. The weather forecast predicted heavy snowfall, but I was undeterred. The allure of walking the very paths where desperate pioneers once walked was irresistible. As I drove deeper into the Sierra Nevada, the landscape transformed into a frozen wilderness. The silence broken only by the crunch of snow under my tires and the distant call of an eagle. Arriving at Donner Pass just as dusk began to fall, I set up camp near a small clearing. The temperature plummeted quickly, the cold biting through my layers despite my best preparations. As night enveloped the pass, the sky darkened, and the first flakes of snow began to fall. Swirling in the chilly wind, I lit a fire, its warmth a small comfort against the encroaching cold, and settled into my tent, ready to capture any unusual activity on camera. Hours passed in uneasy silence. The wind howled outside, creating an almost constant backdrop of white noise. Just as I was beginning to drift into a restless sleep, a faint sound pierced the stillness, a distant, agonized scream that sent shivers down my spine. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding. As I listened intently, the scream was followed by the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow, slow and deliberate, yet somehow out of place in the vast, empty wilderness. Grabbing my flashlight, I cautiously unzipped my tent, the beam cutting through the darkness. The clearing was empty, the snowflakes dancing in the light. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source of the noise, but there was nothing to be seen. Just as I was about to retreat back to the safety of my tent, a shadow flitted across the edge of the clearing, too fast to be a human, yet distinctly humanoid in shape. Heart racing, I grabbed my camera and began to record, hoping to capture evidence of the apparition. As I moved towards the shadow, the temperature seemed to drop further, my breath visible in the freezing air. The footprints I had heard earlier became clearer, large and uneven, leading towards the dense forest that bordered the pass. Summoning every ounce of courage, I followed the trail, the oppressive cold making each step a struggle. The forest was a labyrinth of snow-laden trees, their branches heavy and twisted. The sounds of the blizzard were muted here, the snow dampening the usual noises of the wilderness. As I ventured deeper, the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional distant scream and the soft crunch of my footsteps. Shadows danced between the trees, shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. Suddenly, the sky opened up, unleashing a fierce blizzard that reduced visibility to mere feet. The wind whipped around me, snow stinging my face and obscuring my path. I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. But the forest seemed to close in, the trees forming a barrier that trapped me within their icy grasp. The screams grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the storm like the cries of the damned. Through the blinding snow, I saw a faint light ahead, a flickering glow that seemed to beckon me forward. As I approached, the light revealed itself to be a campfire, its flames dancing against the white backdrop. Around the fire stood figures, their forms blurred and indistinct, shrouded in the shadows of the storm. They were dressed in the worn, tattered garments of the 19th century, their faces etched with pain and desperation. One figure stepped forward, a man with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. His presence was both haunting and sorrowful, a silent testament to the suffering endured by the Donner Party. I felt an overwhelming sense of empathy and sorrow, understanding that these spirits were reliving their final moments of unimaginable hardship. "Why do you haunt these lands?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The man did not respond, but the air around us grew colder, the fire flickering wildly as if caught in an invisible tempest. Another figure emerged, a woman with tear-streaked cheeks, her eyes hollow with grief. She reached out a ghostly hand, her touch cold and intangible. "We cannot move on," she seemed to say, her voice echoing through the storm. "Our souls are trapped in this endless winter, determined to help." I knelt beside them, feeling the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me. "What can I do to free you?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the roar of the blizzard. The figures huddled closer, their forms blending with the shadows as if searching for answers within themselves. As I sat there, the storm began to subside, the winds dying down and the snow settling into a heavy blanket. The apparitions grew clearer, their faces now visible in the dim light. Their eyes, filled with unending pain, met mine, and I felt a surge of determination. "I will remember your stories," I vowed. "I will honor your memories so that you may find peace." The figures seemed to respond, their forms beginning to shimmer and fade. The firelight flickered one last time before extinguishing, leaving me alone in the clearing. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a profound silence that spoke of closure and release. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that I had played a part in freeing these restless souls from their eternal winter. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the remaining clouds, melting the snow and revealing the serene beauty of Donner Pass. I made my way back through the forest, the trail now clear and welcoming. The screams and apparitions were gone, replaced by the gentle sounds of the waking wilderness. The experience had left me forever changed, a deep respect for the resilience of the human spirit and the lingering echoes of the past. Back in town, I documented my findings, ensuring that the stories of the Donner Party would not be forgotten. The haunted whispers of Donner Pass had been silenced, their memories preserved through my words and photographs. Yet, on the coldest nights of winter, when the wind howls through the Sierra Nevada, I sometimes hear faint echoes of screams carried on the breeze, a reminder of the night when the past reached out to guide me towards peace. The nightmare blizzard of the deadly classroom serves as a haunting reminder that some stories refuse to fade, their echoes lingering in the silent whispers of the wind and the cold embrace of winter's wrath. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring need to remember those who have been lost, ensuring that their memories remain alive, even in the darkest of storms. Story number 7. The Nightmare Blizzard of the Deadly Classroom, Nebraska, 1888. Winter in Nebraska was no stranger to harshness, but the blizzard of January 1888 surpassed all memories of previous storms. I grew up hearing the chilling tales of that fateful night, where innocence was lost to the merciless fury of nature. As a child, the stories haunted my dreams, but it wasn't until I returned to my hometown that the true weight of those events settled upon me. I had always been fascinated by history, particularly the untold stories that lingered in the shadows of our collective memory. When I decided to document the history of our small town, the story of the deadly classroom was impossible to ignore. Located in the heart of Nebraska, our town had once been a beacon of education and community spirit. The old Lincoln School stood proudly at the center, its red bricks weathered by time but still holding an air of dignity. Little did we know, it held secrets that would forever scar our community. The night of January 15th, 1888, began like any other winter evening. Snowflakes danced gracefully from the sky, blanketing the town in a serene white silence. Inside Lincoln School, the warmth of the fireplace and the soft murmur of students completing their lessons created a cozy atmosphere. Miss Eleanor, our beloved teacher, was known for her dedication and kindness. She had taught generations of children, instilling in them a love for learning and a sense of responsibility. That evening, the school hosted a special event, a presentation of the new curriculum and a gathering for the parents. The halls were adorned with handmade decorations, and the smell of freshly baked pies wafted through the air. Children giggled as they played, unaware of the impending doom that lurked beyond the walls of their sanctuary. As night fell, a sudden drop in temperature caught everyone by surprise. The cheerful chatter turned to hushed conversations as the wind outside began to howl ominously. Miss Eleanor, ever the pillar of strength, assured everyone that it was merely a passing storm. Little did she know, nature was about to unleash its wrath in a way that would test the very limits of human endurance. Without warning, the blizzard hit with unprecedented ferocity. Snow fell in thick, heavy drifts, and the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundation of the school. Panic set in as the power went out, plunging the school into darkness. The once welcoming halls now felt like a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. Miss Eleanor quickly gathered the children, urging them to remain calm and stay together. She led us to the old library, a room with sturdy doors and a large fireplace that offered some semblance of warmth. The doors to the library were bolted shut, creating a safe haven from the raging storm outside. But safety was an illusion, as the true nightmare was yet to unfold. As the hours dragged on, the storm showed no signs of abating. The temperature inside the library dropped to unbearable levels, and the air grew thick with the scent of burning wood and the faintest hint of something metallic. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering flames of the fireplace. The children huddled together, their breaths visible in the freezing air, while Miss Eleanor tried desperately to keep spirits high. But then, the screams began. First, they were faint, distant echoes that seemed to come from the very walls of the library. The children clung to each other, eyes wide with fear, as the screams grew louder and more distinct. Miss Eleanor's face turned pale as she realized that these were not the screams of children or parents, but something far more sinister. The source of the screams became clear when a figure materialized at the far end of the library. It was a woman, her dress torn and stained with what appeared to be blood. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of any humanity, and her mouth hung open in a silent scream. The temperature plummeted further as she began to move towards us, her footsteps echoing like the tolling of a death knell. Miss Eleanor tried to reason with the apparition, her voice trembling but resolute. "Who are you? What do you want?" The specter paused, her empty gaze fixed on Miss Eleanor. Then, with a suddenness that sent chills down my spine, she lunged forward, her form blurring and distorting as if caught in a whirlwind of pain and anger. The children screamed and scattered, running in all directions in a futile attempt to escape the ghostly presence. I remember clutching my notebook tightly, trying to document everything despite the terror gripping my heart. The screams intensified, now accompanied by the sound of tearing fabric and the scraping of cold, invisible claws against the wooden floors. Miss Eleanor, though terrified, remained composed, guiding the children back to safety while facing the relentless onslaught of the apparition. But the ghost was not alone. One by one, Other figures began to appear, soldiers in tattered uniforms, their eyes empty and their expressions twisted in eternal anguish. The library became a battleground of the damned, where the souls of the fallen sought vengeance for their untimely deaths. The air was thick with the cries of the restless spirits, and the room seemed to warp and twist under the weight of their sorrow. Miss Eleanor's voice broke through the chaos, her words a beacon of hope amidst the despair. "We mean no harm. Please, let us go." The apparitions paused, their forms flickering like faulty projections. The leader of the spectral soldiers stepped forward, his eyes meeting Miss Eleanor's with a mix of sorrow and longing. "We cannot rest," he intoned, his voice echoing through the library. "Our mission was never complete. Our lives were cut short by the very storm that now threatens you." Understanding dawned on me. The spirits were bound to the school by unfinished business, their lives cut short by the blizzard that showed no mercy. It was a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the lingering echoes of past sorrows. With newfound resolve, Miss Eleanor addressed the spirits, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her. "Tell us what we need to do to help you find peace." The ghostly soldiers lowered their heads, their forms shimmering in the cold light. "Honor our memory. Remember the sacrifices we made. Do not let our stories fade into the silence of the storm." As if a weight had been lifted, the apparitions began to fade, their forms dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. The screams ceased, replaced by a profound silence that enveloped the library. The temperature slowly returned to normal, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving behind only the flickering flames of the fireplace and the huddled children, safe but forever changed by the nightmarish ordeal. When dawn finally broke, the storm had abated, leaving behind a town buried in snow and a school forever marked by the tragedy of that night. Miss Eleanor and the children emerged from the library, their faces pale but unharmed, carrying with them the memories of a night when the past reached out to the present in a desperate plea for remembrance. Years later, as I sat in my study documenting the history of our town, the story of the deadly classroom remained a poignant reminder of the thin veil between life and death, and the enduring power of memory and honor. The old Lincoln School stood as a silent witness to the events of that winter night, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past and the cries of the lost. Visiting the school today, the halls are still quiet, the snow still covering the ground, but there is a sense of peace that wasn't there before. The spirits have been honored, their stories told, allowing them to find the rest they so desperately sought. Yet, on the coldest nights of winter, when the wind howls through the empty corridors, one can still hear the faint echoes of screams and the soft footsteps of those who once walked the halls, forever remembered and never forgotten. The nightmare blizzard of the deadly classroom serves as a haunting reminder that some stories refuse to fade, their echoes lingering in the silent whispers of the wind and the cold embrace of winter's wrath. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring need to remember those who have been lost, ensuring that their memories remain alive, even in the darkest of storms.